I was standing in my kitchen in Dallas, the late afternoon light spilling across the counter, when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. These days, calls from my son were rare, and when they came, they usually carried requests: money for a car repair, help with the mortgage, or babysitting I was expected to do without question. But this time David's voice was unusually warm. "Mom," he said, "what are you doing for Thanksgiving?" I laughed softly, though it came out hollow. "Just me, sweetheart. A small chicken. Maybe a pie if my hands don't ache too much. The radio, an old movie I pictured myself at the little oak table by the window. One plate, one fork, one candle lit, more out of habit than celebration." There was a pause on the other end. Then David's tone shifted, syrupy smooth. "That doesn't sound right. The kids have been asking about you. Clara thinks it wouldn't be the same without you here. We want you with us this year." Those words, "we want you," slipped into the hollow parts of me, like water into dry soil. I couldn't remember the last time someone had said them without adding a condition. Wanted, not needed. Wanted for who I was, not what I could provide. My chest tightened, and I had to steady myself against the counter. "Are you sure?" I asked, cautious, almost afraid to believe it. "Of course," David said quickly. "It wouldn't feel right without you." Something inside me lifted. I agreed before I could talk myself out of it. "I'll find a flight," I said. He didn't offer to book one. He didn't mention money, but I didn't care. I had a little tucked away in an envelope in the desk drawer. Christmas money I had never used. I decided this was the reason I had saved it. That night I searched online until I found a non-stop ticket to Atlanta. It wasn't cheap, but I splurged on the seat with extra legroom. $12 more. Silly to some, but to me it felt like a small act of care. The next morning, I shopped for gifts. 2 books for the children, a box of truffles for Clara, who always bragged about her sweet tooth, and something for myself, a navy wool coat that draped just right and made me feel like maybe I belonged in the pictures too. By evening, my suitcase sat open on the bed. I folded the coat carefully, tucked in my old pie dish wrapped in towels, placed the gifts on top. For the first time in years, I felt excited, not anxious. I whispered aloud to the quiet room, as if to seal the moment. Maybe this year will be different. The flight to Atlanta was crowded, as holiday flights always are. Families with strollers, college kids with headphones, businessmen tapping at laptops. I sat quietly in my window seat, cardigan buttoned against the chill of the cabin air, hands folded neatly in my lap. The plane touched down smooth as silk, and for a moment, as the wheels bumped against the runway, I felt like I was arriving not just in a city, but in a promise. By the time I reached the arrivals hall, my heart was pounding with anticipation. I smoothed my skirt, adjusted the collar of my new coat, and positioned myself beneath the bright sign that read, "Arrivals, Gate B." Around me, the air buzzed with reunions. Children rushed into grandparents' arms. Balloons bobbed. People held signs with names scrawled in marker. Every few seconds, the sound of laughter or a sharp cry of joy broke through the hum. I stood tall, suitcase by my side, pie dish carefully balanced on top. I told myself it wouldn't be long. They'd pull up any minute, and I'd see Clara's smile, the kids bouncing up and down, David waving from the car. But minutes stretched. 10, then 20. My eyes darted to the clock on the wall. The plane had landed 42 minutes ago. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Relief surged. I thought it was David. Instead, it was a notification from social media. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something made me open the app. The photo loaded slowly, as if the universe wanted me to savor the sting. There they were, David, Clara, the kids, all crowded around a polished wooden table. Candles glowed, turkey glistened, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and there it was, pie, not mine. In the center, Clara leaned close to David, their glasses raised high in a toast. The caption read, "Full house, full hearts. Happy Thanksgiving from our family to yours." I blinked. My throat went dry. I zoomed in, desperate to find myself in some corner, a stray hand or shadow, proof that I hadn't been erased. But there was no mistake. Every seat was filled. None for me. The crowd around me blurred. The sounds dulled. For a second, I thought I might sit down, but I didn't want to look like a woman abandoned. I gripped the suitcase handle tighter, straightened my back. My coat, still folded neatly over my arm, felt heavier with every passing second. I stared once more at the screen, at their smiling faces that excluded me, and then I locked the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. My chest ached, but no tears came, not yet. I turned away from the sign, from the waiting families, from the promise that had crumbled in a single photograph, and I walked toward the exit, the wheels of my suitcase clicking against the floor, steady and sharp, like a clock counting down. The cold air hit me the moment the sliding doors opened, sharp enough to sting my eyes. I pulled my coat on, but it did little against the Atlanta wind. The crowd thinned behind me, families spilling into cars, voices calling names I couldn't claim. I kept walking, my suitcase wheels rattling against the uneven pavement, the pie dish still wrapped carefully inside, as if it mattered to anyone but me. I didn't know where I was going. Cabs lined the curb, their drivers calling out, but I didn't raise my hand. Somehow, sitting in the back of a taxi, waiting for a house that had no room for me, felt worse than walking aimlessly. Half a mile down, past a row of rental car returns and a flickering street lamp, I spotted a squat little diner with a neon sign that read Tina's Place. The tea buzzed in and out, giving the whole thing a tired charm. Paper turkeys taped to the fogged-up windows reminded me it was still Thanksgiving, even if it wasn't mine. Inside, the air smelled of frying oil and cinnamon. A bell jingled above the door, and a waitress with tired eyes, but a kind smile looked up. "Happy Thanksgiving, hun," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Same to you," I managed, surprised my voice held steady. She slid a laminated menu toward me. "Kitchen's slow, but we've still got turkey and pie." "Pie sounds good," I said. "Pumpkin, if you've got it." "Pumpkin it is," she winked. "Best decision you'll make all day." I settled into a booth by the window. My suitcase rested beside me like a loyal dog. I laid my phone face down on the table, but it vibrated once. Against my better judgment, I flipped it over. A message from Clara. "Thought your flight was tomorrow. Our mistake. So sorry." I stared at the words until they blurred. My hands trembled, not with grief, but with something cleaner, clarity. They hadn't forgotten. They had chosen to stage a picture-perfect Thanksgiving without me, and then toss me a half-hearted excuse once the evidence was already posted. The waitress returned with a warm slice of pie, crowned with a sagging dollop of cream. I picked up the fork, took one bite, and closed my eyes. It was good, maybe not because of the spices or the crust, but because for once, I wasn't baking it for anyone else. When the plate was nearly empty, I pulled my notebook from my bag. On a clean page, in the neat hand of a former school principal, I wrote, "I am not spare. I am not extra. I am not a side dish at someone else's table." I underlined each sentence once firmly, like a vow. By the time I left the diner, the sky had deepened into a bruised purple. The streets near the airport were nearly empty, just the occasional shuttle bus groaning past. My shoes weren't made for walking long distances, but I kept going until a squat beige building came into view. The sign out front flickered, "Valley Inn, weekly rates available." It wasn't much to look at, but it had lights on, and that was enough. Inside, a man at the counter barely glanced up from the football game, playing on his tiny TV. "Need a room?" he asked, voice flat with routine. Yes, just for one night he slid a form toward me, and I handed over my ID and card. "Room 114, end of the row." I thanked him, wheeled my suitcase down the sidewalk, and unlocked the door. The room was plain, the kind of place where the wallpaper peeled at the corners, and the bedspread carried a pattern that belonged to another decade. But the heater rattled to life when I turned the dial, and the bathroom smelled faintly of bleach. It was clean enough. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands. They looked older under the yellow lamplight, the veins raised, the skin lined. These were the same hands that had baked pies for birthdays, stitched costumes for school plays, signed checks for bills my son promised to repay, but never did. I unzipped my suitcase and pulled out the folder I'd slipped in, almost without thinking, before I left Dallas. Inside were years of receipts, bank statements, photocopies of checks, a quiet archive of everything I had carried for David and Clara. I spread the papers across the bedspread, the edges curling slightly from age. Tuition assistance for Ruby's preschool. An invoice from the mechanic when David's car broke down. A note in Clara's handwriting, promising to repay me after her boutique's big launch. Mortgage papers I had co-signed. Every page was a reminder of how often I had been their safety net. The weight of it pressed against my chest, not just the money, but the pattern. The way my love had been measured in quiet sacrifices that no one remembered. Or maybe they remembered and simply took for granted. My phone buzzed again on the nightstand. I didn't reach for it. Instead, I gathered the papers back into the folder, closed it carefully, and set it beside me. For the first time, I didn't feel shame in seeing it all laid out. I felt something else. A sense that maybe, just maybe, the leverage I had given away for years was still mine to claim back. I turned off the lamp, slid beneath the scratchy covers, and whispered into the dark, "Enough." I woke before sunrise, the habit of a school principal who had lived by the bell for decades. The motel's heater coughed out its last burst of warm air as I dressed in the navy coat I'd bought for a holiday that had never come. My suitcase was lighter now, though the pie dish still clinked softly inside. It felt absurd, like carrying proof of my own foolish hope. Instead of heading back to the airport, I turned left, following the cracked sidewalk toward a strip of buildings just waking up. A glowing sign caught my eye. First Fulton Bank. The doors wouldn't open until 8, but I waited, sipping weak coffee from a gas station cup. When the glass doors finally unlocked, I stepped into the quiet lobby. A young teller with nervous energy greeted me with practiced politeness. "Good morning, ma'am. How can we help you today? I'd like to speak to someone about my accounts. All of them." He blinked, then called a manager. Within minutes, I was sitting in a small office with beige walls and the faint smell of toner. A woman named Natalie introduced herself. She wore a tidy blazer, almond-shaped glasses, and the expression of someone who had seen every version of family finance play out across her desk. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Lawson?" "I want to suspend all automatic payments," I said, steady and clear. "Every transfer to family, every tuition payment, every car insurance premium. Effective immediately." Her fingers paused over the keyboard. "Dead. That's quite a few. Are you sure?" "Yes, keep the charities. Stop the rest." There was a moment of silence, the kind that tests resolve. I held her gaze until she nodded. "Understood." As she typed, she glanced at the screen again. "There's also a power of attorney on file. A David Lawson. Do you want to maintain that?" The name lodged in my throat, but my pulse stayed steady. "No, revoke it." Her eyebrows lifted, just slightly before she printed the form. I signed with hands that didn't tremble. By the time I left the bank, the frost on the sidewalks had melted into small silver streams. I walked slowly, feeling the weight lift with every step. Not revenge, not even anger, just the relief of drawing a line after decades of erasure. At the airport that afternoon, waiting for my flight back to Dallas, I called my lawyer, Mr. Harrington. He had handled my husband's estate years ago and still answered with the same calm, gravelly tone. "Margaret," he said, "what can I do for you?" "I want to change my will," I told him, "and I want to create a trust. Everything I own goes to Sophie, my granddaughter, the only one who still called to ask about my day." There was no hesitation in his reply. "Then let's get to work." Back in Dallas, the house felt emptier than usual, though not in the same way it had before. This time the emptiness wasn't loneliness. It was clarity, like a room stripped bare of clutter. I set my suitcase by the door, placed the folder of documents on the kitchen table, and pulled out my notebook. I began writing a letter to Sophie. She was 23 now, in her final year of nursing school, the daughter David had left behind when his first marriage collapsed. Unlike the others, she never forgot me. She sent me snapshots of her cat, asked me for my cornbread stuffing recipe, and called on evenings just to say hello. The words came easier than I expected. My darling Sophie, you once told me I was your safe place. This Thanksgiving, I was invited somewhere I was never meant to belong. I stood at an airport gate, waiting for people who had already raised their glasses without me. But in that silence, I remembered something important. Love isn't measured in obligation, it's measured in presence, and you've never failed me in that. I sealed the envelope, wrote her address in careful script, and walked it to the post office the next morning. 2 days later, my phone rang. The name on the screen lit something in me I thought I'd lost. Joy. Grandma. Sophie's voice was warm, trembling slightly. I got your letter. I sat down at the kitchen table, steadying my breath. You did? I had no idea. Dad and Clara told me you canceled your trip. They said you changed your mind. Her voice cracked. But you were there. You waited. Yes, sweetheart, I was there. And I saw the photo, silence stretched, filled with the weight of betrayal. I'm so sorry, she whispered. That's not yours to carry, I told her. None of this is. There was a pause, then a question so simple it cut me open. Can I come see you? Next weekend? I have a break from classes. My throat tightened, but my answer was certain. Of course. The guest room is waiting. When Sophie stepped off the train that Saturday, she looked older than I remembered, her curls tucked under a beanie, a canvas bag slung over her shoulder. But when she spotted me, her face lit up, and she ran straight into my arms. Hi, Grandma, she whispered against my coat. I held her tight. Hi, baby. You're here, and for the first time in years, I felt what it meant to be chosen. It was the following Thursday when the knock came. 3 deliberate raps against the front door, not the quick tap of a neighbor or the easy rhythm of a delivery driver. I knew before I opened it who would be standing there. Clara. Her hair was perfect, too perfect, pulled into a sleek twist as though she'd rehearsed for this moment in the mirror. She wore a camel-colored coat and heels too narrow for the cracks in my driveway. A leather tote bag hung from her shoulder, heavy with something I couldn't see. Irene, she said softly, the kind of softness that always came with sharp edges. Can we talk? I stepped aside, letting her in. She scanned the living room, as though looking for dust, as if my life could be measured in smudges. She perched on the sofa, only after I sat, crossing her legs neatly, folding her hands in her lap. I know you're upset, she began, her voice rehearsed. Thanksgiving was a misunderstanding. David thought your flight was Friday. That's what he told me. I let the words hang there a moment, then asked, calm as still water, and the photo. Her eyes flickered. What photo? The one you posted. Full house, full hearts, everyone gathered, glasses raised. That was no misunderstanding. She lowered her gaze to her hands, then back up too quickly. That was just for the holiday. It wasn't meant to hurt you. But it did. Clara's mouth tightened. I think we need to move past this. The kids miss you. David's been calling. You've shut us out, and it's making things harder. I leaned forward slightly. No, I stopped filling in the silence for you. There's a difference. For the first time, her composure cracked. She shifted, straightened her coat. I came here because we want to make things right. I studied her, really studied her. The way her posture held impatience beneath politeness. The way her voice avoided the word sorry. You didn't come for peace, I said finally. You came to see if I was still useful. That's not fair. It's true. Her eyes sharpened. You know, David has always counted on your support. If you close those accounts, if you take away what you've given, everything falls apart. I felt my heart slow, not race. Then let it fall. Her face blanched, the first honest expression I'd seen on her. She gathered her tote, stood too quickly, and smoothed her coat with stiff fingers. Well, she said, clipped now. I'm sorry you feel this way. No, I replied, rising to meet her at the door. You're sorry I stopped accepting less than I deserve. She hesitated at the threshold, searching for control she no longer had. Then she left, heels clicking sharp against the porch. The house hummed with silence after she was gone. Not empty silence. Mine. The phone rang that Saturday evening, its shrill tone cutting through the quiet of the house. I knew before I even looked at the screen who it was. David, my son. For a long moment, I simply listened to it ring. Then, with the calm of someone who no longer owed explanations, I picked up. Mom, his voice broke on the first syllable. I didn't think you'd answer. I know, I said, steady. There was silence on the line, then a sharp inhale. I saw the papers. From Harrington, the trust, the will. Why would you do this, after everything? Exactly, I said softly. After everything. You mean the money? He asked. He asked, almost pleading. I mean the forgetting, the late calls, the birthdays that never came, leaving me standing at an airport while you toasted a table that had no seat for me. That wasn't a mistake, David. It was convenient. He exhaled hard, like the truth itself burned. You're punishing us. No, I said, I'm releasing myself from obligations that only moved in one direction. From guilt I carried so long I forgot what lightness felt like. There was a pause. His voice dropped to a whisper. We're still your family. I closed my eyes, steadying myself against the ache in those words. I was your family, David. You haven't been mine in a very long time. When the line went quiet, I hung up first. The next morning, I wrapped a small box in plain brown paper. Inside, nestled in soft cloth, was the Lawson family heirloom necklace, meant for the next matriarch. Alongside it, I placed a copy of the trust and a handwritten note. These are yours, Sophie. Not because you asked, but because you showed up. Wear them when you doubt yourself. You are never invisible in this house. Not then, not now, not ever. At the post office, I slid the package across the counter, my hand steady, my heart steady too. That evening, I set the table for one. Not with grief this time, but with intention. A bowl of lentil soup, a glass of wine I'd been saving for years, and 2 candles burning side by side, their flames dancing in the quiet room. I lifted the glass, whispered into the air, I am still here. Outside, the first snow of the season drifted down, catching in the glow of the streetlights. The silence was no longer heavy. It was mine. 3 days later, my phone rang again. Sophie's name lit the screen. When I answered, her voice trembled with laughter and tears. Grandma, I got the package. The necklace, the papers. I don't know what to say. You already said it, I told her. The day you came without needing a reason. She cried softly, and I let her, listening to the sound of loyalty that had never wavered. That night, as the fire crackled in the hearth, I realized something simple and sharp. Family is not defined by blood or duty. It is defined by presence, by choice, by respect. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is save a seat at the table for yourself.